Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode. Today, I have again a very special guest with me. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi, hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Vanina, and I have been running marketing for Web3 projects for the past over 7 years. So I dare call myself a crypto native and a blockchain OG. The last couple of projects that I worked on were a decentralized Web3 advertising network and a smart contract or account abstraction crypto wallet. And I have just joined Veridise, a company that does blockchain security audits, which is very on point with what we're going to talk about today.
Great, great. And so let's really dive into it. So, blockchain and security for the user end space. What and how can that technology help protect intellectual property rights in the Web3?
Well, I'm going to start a little bit further away because we've got Web3 and blockchain technology, which deals with complex cryptography, which is the pinnacle of security, as we know it right now as cybersecurity. And then on the other hand, we have the users who are dealing with complex and unintuitive user interfaces that hinder security. So this is a juxtaposition that I find particularly interesting in Web3. And then to transition into your question about intellectual property rights and how Web3 can protect it, I want to make the remark that I am not a lawyer, I'm not a legal professional, so I can't speak about that from a legal perspective. But we have on our hands a technology that helps us streamline the protection of intellectual property and intellectual rights through the so-called non-fungible tokens, NFTs. And I'm sure that our listeners who are in the space are very much familiar with the term NFT, so there's no need to explain it. But NFTs are actually a wonderful way to provide provenance and tracking of intellectual property transfers and also of intellectual property ownership. This is something that we don't have in the Web2 world in this um, automated way, so to say. So, yeah, I would say that when it comes to IP rights, Web3 is a major, major step forward for all creators who would like to have their work protected.
Great. And in terms of that, how does a smart contract actually help with the entire process?
Well, a smart contract is just a piece of software. It does what you tell it to do, essentially. But the good thing about smart contracts and the data on the blockchain is that it's immutable. Once written on the blockchain, unless there's a major fork or a 51% attack, it's there. You can't change it. So you can't falsify a document that says, "Hey, I own the intellectual property for that book or for that piece of art." So that's how it works. I don't want to go into the details of how a smart contract actually works because again, I'm a marketer, I'm not a developer or a blockchain engineer. But in layman terms, a smart contract works on the if this then that basis. So you tell the smart contract if this condition is met, then that's what it is. Like if a user signs with this particular wallet, then or mints an NFT with that wallet, then that wallet owns the intellectual property of that NFT. And it is transferable, obviously, but again, this is something that is written on the blockchain and there's a paper trail, well, digital trail that remains online for us.
Yes, great. And in terms of that, if you take marketing into account, what are some of the challenges and limitations that you might have faced while channeling all this decentralization into account?
Well, it has been challenging, not going to lie to you. And one of the biggest challenges that I have found myself facing is the language of Web3 and blockchain and decentralization. If you would like to discuss the way NFTs and smart contracts can enable, say, an artist to protect themselves, and you want to talk to them about that, and you go and you tell them, hey, you should just use NFTs for your art, and you'll be protected. Great. To an artist, NFT means absolutely nothing. Like, I'm not an artist, so I can't distinguish the difference between, say, acrylic paint and some other type of paint, right? Because that's not my job. And it's not the artist's job to know what an NFT is and what a token is and what is fungible and non-fungible tokens, what's the difference between that. So one of the things that we have been trying to tackle as marketers recently is simplify the language that we use when we communicate with the outside world, so to say. And if we talk about NFTs and smart contracts, that is just confusing. That is off-putting to people looking to make the leap into Web3. And that is definitely a hindrance, a barrier for them, because we just make it sound as if it's something incredibly complicated and something that you need to spend hours and hours and hours researching to understand. And yes, it is complex, but what's complex is everything that's happening under the hood. At the end of the day, when you want to have end users use Web3 products, it's all about user interface, user experience, and the way that we as developers in the space create our products to be customer facing. So I would say that, yeah, the biggest issues that I've seen as a Web3 marketer are UX, bad UX, and terrible language, the extremely complicated language that we have been using.
Right. And taking this idea of discussion forward in terms of like creative people trying to put forth their work on Web3, and the fact that they are not that secure with it, that they feel that there is this chance of plagiarism. There's the idea that the NFT itself is not wholly guarded entity itself. So how does a marketing perspective help alleviate those fears so that you can bring on those artists and creative people to Web3?
Well, as marketers, our main job is to sell a product, a service, an idea, whatever you name it. And in order to sell this product, we need to either address a need that is already existing or generate that need, create that need on the market. And then in the case of intellectual property, the problem is already there. We are addressing a need. The need is, I'm an artist. How do I protect my intellectual property rights? Correct. So it is up to us to jump in and explain in a very simple and very everyday language, hey, there's this technology that can help you, and this is how you can benefit from the technology. And yes, there will be a learning curve, but this is what we can do. So I think that perhaps marketers, Web3 marketers, are probably the best people to put forward education, because we are essentially at the end of the day, we're essentially the translators of that super technical lingo and of those very complex concepts into human readable and human understandable language. So as these translators, it is our job to explain to the users how they can benefit. We don't need to go into details and explain to them how the technology works or what a smart contract is. All we have to do is tell them how they can take advantage of that technology. The other spot where I see the role of marketers in the space is working very closely with product teams, because dApps right now are still confusing, even though we're making a lot of progress. simplifying things, simplifying the interaction and the entry points for Web2 users into Web3. But there's still a lot to be done, and product teams are often very technical as well, and they need that perspective of a very lame user. And I don't use lame in a derogative connotation, but rather somebody who is used to the Web2 technology, somebody who's used to looking at an app and figuring out how to sign up and operate that app within 3 seconds, right? So we've got that in Web 2, and we just need to transfer it into Web 3. And I think it's up to us marketers to work with product teams and provide data, provide user research, and provide insight into how people use Web 2 technologies so that we can adapt the Web 3 environment to be as easy to use as a Web 2 app is.
And yeah, that's very nicely explained actually, and a lot of confusion is around that how to transcend oneself from web 2 to web 3. So that makes a lot of sense. And moving forward to the next part, which is the tokenization and then the monetization of that particular token, that how does one translate monetization into the whole scenario? Like, do you have any examples that you've ever worked with anyone who's basically been able to monetize their work through the platform that you're providing?
Well, I have not worked for an NFT platform, so I don't have that first-hand experience. But I do have a lot of friends and a lot of acquaintances who are mostly graphic designers. Not gonna lie to you, they're not like traditional artists who would be painting in a studio with like paint on canvas. But we've seen that being monetized as well, like traditional art, via the big auction houses like Christie's, or big fashion brands like Balenciaga, for example, or even sports brands like Nike. They are monetizing in intellectual property in the Web3 space, by providing various NFT collections. So it is absolutely possible and doable to monetize your work. It is a little bit confusing to figure out how to connect, again, if you're coming from the Web3 world, how to translate this magic internet money that you get into your crypto wallet into actual fiat money that you're used to using and and you feel comfortable with. Um, and I think this is where we need to have like a little bit of a learning curve, for artists. But at the end of the day, there's no difference between selling a painting on canvas at an art show and selling an NFT online for crypto. The difference comes, I suppose, um, from the value that is assigned to the art. And this is where there's still a lot of questions to be addressed, in terms of, art theory and what constitutes art. At the end of the day, if you have a Picasso painting, you may not love it. You may not like the style of Picasso, but there is an international consensus around the world that Picasso is a major artist and his art is valued highly because of, I don't know, context, technique, some arbitrary decision of somebody who said, hey, this is amazing art, and they influenced a big group of people, right? So it's the same when it comes to NFTs and the Web3 space. Again, we've got a pixelated image of, I don't know, a pixelated portrait of somebody. Is that art? Is something that you can generate within a few minutes with an automated script? Is that art? To me personally, not necessarily, but that's just one person's opinion. Again, looking at prices at which NFTs are being sold, apparently to a lot of people, yes, this is art. This is even a status symbol. in the NFT and Web3 world. So yeah, and I think that we're going to see a lot more traditional artists making the jump into Web3 and kind of like setting up standards um, for for what constitutes art, so that we can price this art accordingly. But it's a free market. Something is worth, whether it's a service or a product or a piece of art, it is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it, right? So if somebody is willing to pay millions of dollars for a pixelated JPEG, then that's the value of that JPEG.
Right. And this brings me to the next part, which is like very closely related and very hyped up these days: AI and art. Like the idea of how AI, artificial intelligence, is using or maybe abusing the space, so to speak, for like, especially in terms of intellectual property, and the idea that the tokenization through AI is becoming far more dubious than it should have been. What do you, any comments on that?
Whew. Well, that's a huge topic. Like this is a topic of its own, like multi-episode podcast itself. I'm going to be honest with you. I am fascinated by AI, and I have been playing with Midjourney and similar platforms. But I'm honestly, literally afraid to look into the legal part of things and to start researching the matter of intellectual property and generative AI. Because at the end of the day, what the technology that AI uses, very it's very complicated to relate that to the process of creation in legal terms. I know it sounds a little bit weird, probably, but if I again, I'm going to give the example with a painter. If I'm a painter and I sit in my studio and I start painting something on canvas with paint, all this is coming from my imagination, and I'm using my hands and my tools, my canvas, my brushes, my paint to put that and create an actual tangible piece of art, right? When it comes to AI, it's the AI that generates the art, but it's being driven by my prompt. So, in a way, you can say, I'm still the artist. I'm still creating that piece of imagery, for example, or that song or whatever, through my prompt. I'm just using a different medium. Instead of a piano for playing a song, I'm using an AI platform to generate the music for me. Instead of using paintbrushes, I'm using a platform like Midjourney to create that art for me. So I think it's a huge question, and honestly, for myself, I don't have the answer. Um, I don't know if we'll have the answer as a society anytime soon, and I'm not sure who owns the IP. I don't think Midjourney can own IP, so perhaps the company behind Midjourney. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Um, but it's a very interesting question, and I'll be very, very curious to see how things develop in the near future with AI and how it's used in art.
Yes, I think it's something that will, the answer will keep coming as the time progresses, because it's still a very, uncharted territory for all involved: artists, stakeholders, developers, everyone. So that's a fair enough response to that particular question. And you're right, it could be another 3-hour podcast with like multiple variants coming in. So I don't think we have time for that. But yes, please.
No, I was going to say we would need the lawyers into that podcast.
Probably need a legal team setting on the side. Okay, this is something you can say. This is something that you can't. So yeah, and I think moving towards the idea of some best practices that you can advise users in terms of the security and interacting with decentralized Web3 space.
Ooh, best practices. I can talk about that for hours, but
Narrow it
um
down. That's good.
Apply common sense. I'm not going to go as far as tell people, hey, learn how to read solidity contracts and smart contracts to make sure that you are protected. But apply common sense. Don't try to learn when, especially when you're using a crypto wallet, because that's your first point of contact, and that's basically the tool that you're going to use for anything, whether it is creating or selling NFTs or just, storing cryptocurrency or even connecting to a Web3 game. Make sure that your wallet is protected, that you don't share your seed phrase. If possible, use a wallet without the seed phrase. Just be cautious and be aware that there are scammers looking to get your NFTs and your crypto everywhere on the internet, and they're very smart. They're very, very good when it comes to phishing and to kind of like creating situations in which you share your login credentials for your crypto wallet. So be very, very careful. Read a little bit on Web3 security, because yeah, I know it seems unnecessary, but in the long run, this is what will protect you and this is what will help you stay safe. Use cold storage whenever possible, especially for your more valuable crypto and NFTs. Use a hardware wallet, and yeah, just be smart, double check everything. If you're transferring something to a particular address, double, triple, quadruple check the address and make sure that you're sending it to the right address. Check addresses on Etherscan. A lot of addresses that have been associated with different scams are marked as scam addresses on Etherscan. They're doing a lot to improve their UI as well, and UX. So yeah, just make sure that you don't do anything stupid, because right now the majority of money and value lost on Web3 is lost due to a human error. People sending tokens to a contract address, or people being scammed and giving away their seed phrases, and even experienced people in the space have been known to be victims of theft and social engineering. So be very cautious about the information that you give out about yourself, and quadruple check the addresses.
Great. That's sage advice. And lastly, just one basic question, barring the legal ramifications of it. How do you see, from the marketing aspect, the idea around or the knowledge around security in the cyberspace of Web3 evolving? Do you see more users actually getting an understanding eventually with the language, or do you feel that it's still a very long road ahead?
I think it is a long road ahead, but as I said, we're making progress, and the progress is coming not so much from the end users, but from us developers in the space, from the people creating products and services in the space. And we have finally realized and wrapped our heads around the fact that we need to provide something that's simple and understandable to people. I was recently speaking at a conference, at a crypto conference, and after my talk, I was approached by somebody who works, a legal professional who's working closely with the team that does the MICA regulation. They were like, "Oh, we need to like get you involved and talk about how we can create crypto education, because I'm good at." As I said, being a translator between the complex and the benefits and the simple way to use things. So I think that we're making a lot of progress. And I also think that having a little bit of legislation like MICA in the European Union, for example, will help us a lot as well, because that will drive a lot more people from Web 2 into Web 3, and that will push the app and blockchain services developers again to like work towards that audience. Because so far we have been focusing on the core community, core crypto community, and we have been like, yeah, people understand. They know what a smart contract is. We don't need to explain it. People know what a seed phrase is. We don't need to explain it. But now we're bringing in more people from the Web2 world. And yet we do either need to explain it better, or we need to create interfaces that go around that altogether, or both. And I think that we're making solid progress in that direction. And I think that we are on the way. And you can see that, especially with smart crypto wallets, for example. If you look at smart wallets like Amber Wallet or Argent or even Safe, you can see that the interface is getting simpler and simpler by the day. And that is a big step forward. Account abstraction is going to help us a lot because it's going to help us create wallets that are programmable, so to say, and that will help us bring a UX that is much simpler to understand. So yeah, it is a long way, but not that long. Like we can walk it together.
Great. So that's a very optimist idea to get actually to be streamlined to. So thank you so much for taking the time out and having this wonderful discussion. And you're right, we could actually just keep going because the topics themselves, they beg to be asked more and more questions and then answered in such detail. So yeah, but maybe for some other time we can have a more longer session. But until then, thank you so much for taking the time out and being a part of this.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Jawad and signing off. Bye.
All right. Bye.